Morning.
Good morning, Pedro. We see you.
Thank you. Good morning, Sonny.
So it is 9:30, but do we have a quorum? Clerk, do we have a
We do
quorum?
not have quorum yet.
Okay. All right. We'll wait another few minutes.
Chairhouse, is there any way that you may be able to change the audio receive on your device? You're very faint here in our boardroom.
Okay. Is this any better?
I mean, I can pump it. It's a little bit better.
It's slightly better. Maybe if you could sit closer to it just throughout the meeting, that might help. If you don't have another external device, that's okay.
This is my external device.
Okay. All right.
I'll pump it.
Yeah, it's just with a couple of people in the boardroom, just sounds a little different.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So is this any better? I'm as close as I can get to the microphone.
I think that'll be good for the meeting, ma'am. Thank you.
And Chair, we do have a quorum now.
Oh, very good. Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the May 11th, 2022 Independent Taxpayers Oversight Committee meeting. Thank you, staff, for putting this together, as always. And I also want to thank everyone that's on the call or in the boardroom for this meeting. We're going to have a hybrid meeting. My preference would be to meet in person, but due to certain unforeseen circumstances, I'm here on the web today. But we do have, I don't know if we have any members. I think we have Mike Kinney in the boardroom. I see him sitting down, I believe. So today's meeting is going to be hybrid. So that means we have both members of Italk on the phone or on the call and virtually and in the boardroom. We want to just make sure that everyone understands how the process works for both the members and excuse me, and the public. So if you are speaking, first of all, for iTalk members, and I just lost my, okay, for iTalk members, if you're speaking, we just want to make sure that you turn your microphone on if you're in the room and stay close enough to the microphone to be able to, so we can hear you. And as always, if you're on virtually as a member, you will raise your hand so I can see both, hopefully. I have a little hard time seeing Mike all the way down there at the end, but we'll do the best we can. Mike, speak up if you need to talk. So, and also, same thing, if you're a member of the public in the room, please make sure you submit a speaker slip to the clerk. And for those who are virtual, continue to raise your hand so we can recognize you for the meeting. And then just want to make sure that everyone knows this meeting is always open to the public, either via Zoom or in the room. So we've already confirmed that we have a quorum, so we want to go ahead and get started with our interpretation services. I believe Ruth Monroy will be our interpreter. So Ruth, go ahead and give us the information about interpretation.
Yes, of course. Thank you. If you're joining us today in the Sandag boardroom and need interpretation into Spanish, please check out a headset from the receptionist on the 7th floor. Oh my gosh.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Yes. The headset looks like a little iPod and comes with an earpiece, which you can use to hear the meeting in Spanish. Simply hold the earpiece to your ear and the interpreter will come on automatically. Si se ha unido a la reunión de hoy en la sala de juntas de SANDAG y necesita interpretación al español, por favor diríjase a la recepción del piso 7 y solicite un receptor. El receptor se parece a un pequeño iPod y se puede usar para escuchar la reunión en español. Simplemente sostenga el auricular junto a su oído y la interpretación comenzará simultáneamente. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, por favor desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, que es el globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom en celular o tableta, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. Gracias. And the following instructions are for people joining the meeting remotely. To use the Zoom interpreting feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are located. Click on the interpretation icon, which is the world icon, and select English as your language. If you are joining using the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone or tablet, please press the ellipses, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. So we would also like to make sure everyone understands the public information or public comment process. Our liaison, Zara, will go through that again. Go ahead, Zara.
Thank you, Chair House. As you stated, we will take both in-person and virtual public comments. Members are asked to turn on their cameras when they have a comment or question, and then Chair House will recognize you. As noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailing comments, the public may also provide live comments during today's meeting. In order to provide live comments, you can join today's Zoom meeting through the link or by dialing one of the numbers from your phone that are provided on the cover page of today's meeting agenda. Join the meeting by clicking on the Join Webinar link provided in the confirmation email you receive upon registering. When public comments are called for on an item on the Zoom platform, click on the Raise Hand icon in the Zoom toolbar on the top right of the screen. The chair will call on you by the name you provided. If you are participating by telephone, press *9. The chair will call on you by the last 3 digits of your telephone number. The instructions for providing live comments are also on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made a part of today's meeting record. Thank you, Chair House.
Thank you very much, Zara. Okay, we're going to get started. Just want to remind everyone that we have a very full agenda today, and I would appreciate if all the presenters stay within their time frame and be brief and concise, out of respect for all the presenters, so we can get through the meeting, the whole agenda. So before we get started, let's make sure if there are any public comments first. Francesca or Clerk, do we have
I don't have any in-person or virtual public comments for this item.
Very good. What about Italk members? Are there any members that have any comments before we get started? Don't see any hands raised. Okay, then we get started. So let's go to our second item on the agenda. If Mr. Dujon is on, if you could go ahead, please provide your SANDAG report.
Thank you, Chair House, and good morning, committee members. So I want to start off by addressing the loss of revenue that resulted from PayPoints not operating on the SR125 last summer. This is a serious issue, and that is why we alerted the board as soon as we found out. Our Deputy CEO for Business Operations, Ray Major, is an expert in organizational management and has made this his top priority. Ray and the team have completed their review in coordination with the Independent Performance Auditor and determined the total loss to be approximately $1.8 million. We take our financial responsibilities very seriously and have made management changes in response to what has happened. I have taken on the acting role as operations director while we recruit for the position. The job announcement for this position closes this week, and we'll start the interviewing process shortly. We also are having an independent assessment completed by Fagan Consulting, experts in the tolling industry, to further inform our processes and practices going forward. We will keep you informed of any further developments. I'm happy to provide updates on the exciting work happening here at Sandag. Early this week, Hassan and Colleen attended the inauguration of the Tijuana International Airport's new passenger processing facility at CBX. As you know, we have been working very closely with our partners in Mexico on the Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project, and we look forward to continuing our partnership with Mexico to build a brighter future for our binational region. We'll actually give you the latest updates today as Otay Mesa East progresses on our last agenda item today. This week, Colleen is in Washington, D.C. to attend the Coalition for America's Gateway and Trade Corridors annual legislative trip. This is an important opportunity for Sandag to participate in national discussions around goods movement and the funding and infrastructure needed to make sure people and goods can continue to move through our region, like the future Otay Mesa East Port of Entry. As I'm sure you have heard, on May 1st, we launched the Youth Opportunity Pass, which provides free transit to anyone in the San Diego region 18 and under. This is a life-changing opportunity for our region's young people. We have been working closely with our partners at the county, MTS, and NCTD to get the word out about this first-of-a-kind program. We received very positive feedback from across the region. In fact, we saw more than 1,500 Youth Pass signups during April. That is 3 times as many as were signed up between January through March of this year. We appreciate your support with spreading the word on this great program. We also recently announced that we are moving forward on the Central Mobility Hub project to connect transit to the airport. This project is a fundamental objective of the 2021 regional plan. The environmental analysis is underway, and the project team will be providing a comprehensive report to the Board of Directors at their meeting this Friday, May 13th. Since the beginning of the year, we have opened 11 miles of bikeways and will open 11 more miles before the end of the year. These bikeway projects complete critical portions of our regional bikeway network, and they are opening just in time for our Bike to Work Day on May 19th. We hope you can hop on your bikes next week on the morning of May 19th and stop by one of our hundreds of pit stops around the region for Bike to Work Day. That concludes my report, Chair. I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dijon. Are there any public comments on this topic?
No public comments on this item.
I do see Mr. Orso's hand up. Go ahead, Pedro.
Good morning, Andres. How are you? My question has to do with the SR 125. I mean, I totally understand that it was partly a human error and also a system error that failed, that created the problem. But I don't know if you can, at a very high level, highlight what things are you doing to prevent this from happening in the future?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. And I think the biggest failure that we had was that the equipment on the facility hadn't been replaced since we took over the tolling facility out of bankruptcy in 2012. And the contractors, once we got them on board, to change both the back office system and also the tolling facilities, took a lot longer than we anticipated. In fact, SR 125, we hope will actually go live next month, May 22nd is the date. So part of it was the delay in our contractors and getting our equipment up and running. The other failure was when 5 of the pay points went down. That's something that management should have reacted to a lot faster. I think part of the issue was that this happened under COVID, and during COVID we had some erratic numbers. As you're aware, we had the Delta variant and then the Omicron variant, and so traffic patterns were a little erratic. And so over the time period when this happened, initially we thought it was more of a COVID issue, but then as the summer passed and traffic should have picked up and it wasn't, we realized that there were faults on the road that management hadn't caught. So it was kind of a combined issue between management and what's happening out on the field with our contractors. But to kind of get to your question as to what we're doing now, we're monitoring very carefully. We have management reports that we've expanded on, not only looking at daily reports, but also daily reports in comparison to the last month, the last 3 months, just to make sure that things are operating the way they are. And as I also mentioned, we have consulted with Fagan Consulting. The group is actually getting underway this week with kind of doing a little bit of a deeper dive to ensure that the practices and procedures that we have in today are good enough to make sure that we see any issues that come up. But then also the good news is hopefully by the end of this month, we will have the new system up and running. So again, it was a combination of a number of things failed, but I think we have it under control, and we're fairly confident at this point that if something like that happens again, we'll be able to catch it pretty quickly.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So I do see a public member comment. Clerk, do you want to call on?
Thank you, Chair. Tim Bylush has his hand up on this item. Tim, you're self-muted at the moment. You can begin when you're ready.
Thank you once again for this meeting. I'm up in Del Mar and appreciate what the work the TransNet committee is doing, the Italk committee is doing for TransNet Oversight. And you have a busy schedule. I won't take much time. In computing, there is a joke that goes, it was a feature, not a bug. And I want to echo Mr. Orso's comments, because I would appreciate understanding. I haven't seen it in the news media nor presented to any of the committees I've been into to explain a little more about what happened. And I think that would help educate the public as to the complexity of these automatic computer systems. This happened during the pandemic when there were cuts to budgets, there was huge changeovers. That's not excuses, but it is the accompanying issues. In the media, I've seen the Sandag organization being attacked for several things, and including for this particular, what they're terming as a fiasco. So I see it as a warning for any automatic computer systems, and to integrate it better with oversight, and not just at administrative in the Sandag level, but also there are others who are executives outside of Sandag that have some responsibility for paying attention. I'm concerned that there's a tax for high-speed rail, the 50-year plan that I saw produced just recently, and the vehicle mileage assessments of the fundings that are being used for what I would consider political issues, as opposed to finding solutions to the problems. So at the same time, this was during the pandemic, and there's probably no way for the drivers to know. I'm not sure what the actual details are, how they're charged, or whether they would be checking accounts, but those are all things I would hope would be included in the updates that Mr. Orso has asked about, and the staff has alluded to. Thank you for taking this time, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Dr. Bylash. Okay, let's move on to our next item on the agenda. We have 3 items on the consent agenda. We will need to approve all of them together. First item is the meeting minutes, and then we also are listing the draft schedule of Italk agenda topics. This is a revolving agenda forum. It changes because of the topics that come up, but we want to make sure people are aware of what we're going to be discussing in the future. And then we also have an update on the goals that we set for Italk for this year, for this fiscal year. So is there any item that needs to be pulled off the agenda for discussion, or can we move on? First of all, let me ask if I don't see any public comments, right, Clerk?
There are no public comments.
So for the members of Italk, is there anything that should be pulled out, or can we move forward with getting a motion to approve the consent items?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Halpern moved and Mr. Orso seconded. Clerk, please go ahead and take a vote.
Thank you, Chair. For CEO Private Sector, Chair House.
Approved.
For Finance and Budgeting, Vice Chair Halpern.
Halpern approve.
For Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition, Jonathan Frankel.
Frankel approve.
Thank you. Biology, Environmental, and Licensed Engineer are both absent. For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Michael Kenny.
Approve.
And for Contractor Construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
Approve.
Thank you, and that item passes unanimously with those members present.
Well, that worked well for our first hybrid vote, so very good. Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is actions by the Transportation Committee. And I see Ariana, who is going to present that one.
Thank you, Chair House. Since your last meeting in April, we've had a number of actions that the Transportation Committee and the board took. The first, they heard about the Otay Mesa East project, which is on your agenda today. The Transportation Committee adopted the RTIP Amendment number 10, which you saw at your last meeting. Chair House shared the results of your fiscal and compliance audits for fiscal year 21 at the Transportation Committee. And then the Transportation Committee recommended and the board approved the related funding eligibility requests by the NCTD and the cities of Del Mar and San Marcos. And then in addition, the Transportation Committee recommended and the board approved the TransNet apportionments and revenue estimates that we presented to you last month. And then finally, the board approved the continuation of teleconferenced and hybrid meetings for an additional 30 days. Happy to help answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any public comments?
There are no public comments on this item.
Very well. Anyone from members of Italk who has a comment or question? If not, I don't see any hands. Let's move on to our next item, item number 7, City of Carlsbad TransNet program. I want to first of all thank the city for being here. One of the goals of Italk was to connect more with the jurisdictions that are receiving TransNet funds. So we appreciate you being here and providing your comments. I believe Tom Frank is going to be our presenter. There's Tom. Hi, Tom. Long time no see.
Yeah, good morning, Chair and committee members. It's my pleasure to be here this morning. And I was hoping to see you, Chair, in person, but like you, I'm used to the hybrid meetings, and so I completely understand. And also for my APWA friend, Oso Delgado, I'm looking forward to seeing actually both of you at a future APWA event. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity to see you in person. But with that, I know you have a packed agenda, so I'll try and keep my presentation concise. So it's just starting off just a bit about Carlsbad. Carlsbad updated its general plan in 2015, which revamped its circulation element to a mobility element, which is focused on implementing complete streets and moving people, not just cars. The city's progressive mobility element, along with its climate action plan, aligns perfectly with Sandag's faster, fairer, and cleaner mantra. In addition, the city is a huge supporter of innovation and uses big data in its decision-making process, which makes employment at the city completely exciting and rewarding for all those engineers and planners out there that may be looking for future positions with the municipality. We do have open positions. So with that, I'll move into today's presentation. Next slide, please. Oh, I've got a clicker. All right, so today I will be giving homage to TransNet and great appreciation towards the taxpayers for approving this tax. Secondly, I'm going to touch upon present trends. Like I said, we look at big data. Thirdly, I'm going to present some considerations for TransNet moving forward. And then lastly, I'll give homage to your committee as well for your oversight of this important tax. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of our Keystone projects, which we use our TransNet on. We get about $4 million per year on the TransNet funds. And so our pavement management program is a great example of one of those key projects. And in this program, we also try and realign our right-of-ways to best serve all the users of the road. So in this particular case, it's a APWA award winner, and we completed a road diet on La Costa Avenue. Secondly, here's our ADA improvement program, and this creates accessible pathways within our public right-of-way. Here is another gateway project on the north end of our city along the old PCH alignment. We call it Carlsbad Boulevard. This was completed in 2014. Obviously, it's a roundabout. It also implemented a separate Class 1 bike and ped facility, which connects Carlsbad over the lagoon to Oceanside. Here is a recently completed project on Palomar Airport Road addressing congestion near the I-5 interchange area. And we did use TransNet funding in this and was a great success. And then lastly, I wanted to focus on a few projects that are under design. 2 of these projects are focused on implementing complete streets within our community. And then the other 2 are along El Camino Real, addressing congestion and implementing multimodal improvements through those corridors. I had to highlight this exciting project, the South Carlsbad Coastline project. This provides the opportunity to repurpose South Carlsbad Boulevard for uses for the community would like to see, not just for cars. I'm so excited about this one. I'm actually the project manager, and I'll just leave you at, please Google the project or go to that web address and learn more about it. So moving on to present trends, and I take a lot of my data from Sandag, and I greatly applaud their effort for their revamping of their regional plan. A tremendous effort, and our general plan is really in alignment with the updated regional plan. So this is from 2020, and it shows, as we all experienced, the highway travel just plummeted, which was great for travel times, went down 17% approximately in 2020. Also, transit really declined by nearly 60%. But the good news was transit demand management and bike ridership just skyrocketed up 40%. Then moving on, also looking at trends of vehicle miles traveled. This is from the U.S. Department of Transportation and covering a 10-year period. So you can see the VMT, to no surprise, is slowly crawling up. Then comes COVID, it tanks down tremendously, but it rebounded rather quickly. The graph on the left is NCTD's total boardings. So this is a 10-year look back. You can see actually transit boardings for NCTD peaked in 2015 and have ever since been going down. And then you could see the beginning of COVID, it really went down, that 60%, which I mentioned. And unfortunately, the second year of COVID, 2021, it really further went down, like, as you can see in the graph. The graph on the right is a rideshare graph since 2016 to present. Again, you can see the rideshare programs really going up in popularity since the advent of the iPhone. And then COVID hit and everything tanked. And then ever since then, the rideshare programs have been rebounding rather well. Here is a graphic I wanted to show to give real perspective of people movement along the NCC or the North County corridor. And so this is both for I-5 travel, people traveling, and the coaster travel. And so the bars on the right, the gray bar, the I-5 data I took from 2017 Caltrans data, and it shows that about 158 million trips per year, and according to 2017 data, were traveled along I-5, whereas the coaster trips in 2017 were 1.4 million, or 0.9%. So then looking forward into our nasty COVID year, that's the blue bar chart on the left. Of course, the same number from 2017 for the freeway travel. And then unfortunately, as I mentioned, the transit and including the coaster traffic went down to 163,000 trips, or 0.01%. So just a fraction of travel along the coaster. And it's slowly making headway, but the fixed route transit has been struggling. So then I wanted to move on to considerations for TransNet moving forward. I give a much thanks to all of your audit reports, which you oversee. And just in the 10 years looking back report and the conclusions and future considerations, basically, given how technology changes in the transportation landscape over the last decade, it suggests that SANDAG continually reevaluate the portfolio of projects remaining to be complete and make sure they're the best mix for achieving congestion relief and other goals of the TransNet program. And then the second point is just for SANDAG to be nimble, recognizing the changing landscape of transportation, and to be sure to employ planning efforts that avoid building expensive infrastructure that soon may be obsolete. So with that, I also looked at the audit report from last year, and I know this graphic's a little fuzzy, I apologize for that, but if you look at the highlighted, the last row, it shows the coaster improvements, and it shows what's been completed to date, and the highlighted figure on the right is $8.2 billion. And that's a big number because, as you've heard, there's a Del Mar tunneling, there's Sorrento Valley tunneling, and then all the grade separations. And we have one of those grade separations in Carlsbad. We'd like to move forward, the Village Trench. So that's a big number. I just wanted to give you the perspective of what's being planned to be spent on that infrastructure, and then also recognizing the current usage of that coaster program. So I wanted to also highlight, so just remember those points, but I wanted to highlight and give recognition to the awesome improvements completed on the NCC project. And here's a overview or a aerial, it's actually a graphic that was in the EIR showing the alignment over San Elijo Lagoon, and it was built to its ultimate configuration, which includes 4 general purpose lanes and 2 managed lanes in each direction. And that's what's built out there today. So I borrowed this graphic from SANDAG and wanted to just highlight that the darker colored lanes signify the managed lanes. So you can manage those in any fashion or criteria that SANDAG and Caltrans chooses to. So with that, I have suggested, and I love talking to SANDAG staff about possibilities moving forward. And so with that, as we've seen, the flexible fleets has really been gaining popularity, and I applaud SANDAG for including that as one of their 5 big moves and for pursuing contracts to further this option and this service option. So here's some vehicles that are currently available for future public transit flexible fleet options, and I've actually ridden in that solo, and it's quite an interesting ride. It goes up to 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
And then here's another graphic from SANDAG, and just envision what could possibly be a future public transit flexible fleet option. You could literally get picked up from your work or from your home. And when we analyze trips, we analyze door-to-door travel because that's the time it really takes to get where you want to go when you're under a crunch. So the problems with fixed rail alignments is it's the transitions, the number of different types of mode travel you need to make that add to that door-to-door travel. But just envision you get picked up at your home, you then have a non-congested managed lane option to go down I-5, and then it brings you to your work. That looks like it may be popular, and I greatly appreciate SANDAG considering that as one of your flexible fleet options for public transit in the future. So some suggestions for SANDAG regarding updates to regional plan relative to TransNet. Considering the trends I've kind of highlighted over the last 7 years, just moving forward, when you do your updates, whether in 3 or 4 years, really look at those model assumptions predicting the increased transit ridership. Secondly, consider increasing the budgets for complete corridors, flexible fleets, and active transportation. As we've seen around the region, active transportation is skyrocketing. And then lastly, regarding any changes to the extension ordinance or the expenditure plan, please have those items go before what used to be called the City County Technical Advisory Committee, or CTAC, and now it's, I believe, being called the Mobility Working Group. And of course, your committee, because You're a great oversight committee, and that's why you're formed, basically. So lastly, I just wanted to give you a big homage and thank you for your oversight duties. I know you volunteer for this position and you take it serious, and just wanted to really thank you. This is in your agreement, and it basically shows the intent of Italk as a functional partner, and one of those tenets is flexible. And it's the intent that Italk will assist Sandag to be opportunistic and take advantage of changing situations in the future with regards to technology and transportation development. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We greatly appreciate TransNet funding. We greatly appreciate working with Sandag staff, and we greatly appreciate Italk. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Really appreciate your comprehensive presentation. You covered a lot of areas, and let me go to the public first and ask clerk to recognize the public comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Tim Bylash, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you once again for taking my comments. Tim Bylash up in Del Mar. I want to thank Tom Frank, representing the transportation engineers from the city there. This report showed some real things, and I love that, and the hopeful real things. And so it's nice to have a little bit of that in these very difficult discussions I've been hearing. I just want to make a quick mention about routing. In terms of an individual trying to go from point A to point B and making all the connections and payment for the rail services, the different ones that are involved. My own personal experience more recently, I mentioned at the board last time, going up to Northwest Los Angeles requires coordinating a lot of things. And I spent about a half hour on my computer before going, found a route, found the times, and then I couldn't figure out how to pay for it because it involved 3 different agencies. And also when I went down to the fair at Balboa a couple of weeks ago, I had some difficulty figuring out the units. So those connections, as was outlined, are really important. And I want to give a shout out to the station person that helped several of us boarding the trains at the Fashion Valley station, the trolley. It really is a little bit trying to figure out the exact details of purchasing sometimes, the changes in the names for things. So there were probably half dozen of us that were helped in a short period of time. So just a few comments, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bylash. And yes, I think it's important to make sure there's consistency and the traveling public has an easier time figuring that out. So I'm going to hopefully ask Sandag members, staff to look into that. Thank you so much for your comment. Are there any comments from the members of Italk? Mr. Halpern and then Mr. Urso.
Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. I want to applaud your orientation and embrace of data and analytics. And I'm sure you're a fan, as am I, of the work that Ray Major's team did in the run-up for the new regional plan, showing the fairly granular relationships between where people live and where people work. And so, as underpinning the transportation needs. And, I apologize, I don't have actually all that data in my head. So with regard to the city of Carlsbad, I'm wondering if you just give us a little bit of perspective, thinking in that simple term of where people work, where people live. Are there any particular major points within Carlsbad that people are going to, and other points where people are coming from into Carlsbad, sort of in the terms that Ray's presented numerous times in terms of where those critical flows are? Is it fairly dispersed, or there are a couple of very major transportation trends, if you will, vis-a-vis the where people live to where people work in Carlsbad? That would be helpful context to understand a little better what you guys deal with. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, committee member. And yes, there is actually. We have a rather robust, innovative industrial land use area, and that has been deemed as one of our mobility hubs within the regional plan. So yeah, that's definitely a destination for regional commuters. Of course, we also have our amazing coastline and our village areas. So those have denser land use, and those are very popular on the weekend. And also there's a lot of commercial in our village area. So those are two end destinations for work. We are a suburban area, so we do have spread out land use. So in that, what I've seen, the trends is the fixed bus rail or the bus routes are struggling, and we can see they have low ridership, and that's where flexible fleets really does lend itself. And so secondly, if the region did consider a managed lane that was dedicated to a public transit option, it could be a completely clean, non-fossil fuel burning, non-greenhouse gas emitting type of travel, which could be very, very efficient and very beneficial to all of the region's goals.
Great, thank you. Appreciate the context, and thanks for taking the time to come down today. Really excellent presentation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Mr. Orso, please go ahead.
Nice to see you, Tom. And my question is more of a comment. I think I applaud the city of Carlsbad for, it seems to me wanting to take the leadership in what you're calling flexible fleets. Because I do agree with you. I mean, one of the things that I struggle here where I live is I see all of these really large buses moving about and with one person, maybe 5 hours or so. So they're not being utilized to the extent possible. So, the fleets that you're talking about could make it simpler and more useful and maybe less of a cost for the transportation. I think the challenge is, how do you implement something like that and how do you do it? And, one of the things that I have always believed in is that things start with me. And in this case, it would be, okay, what can the city of Carlsbad do to promote this? And I think I applaud you because I think you're doing that by mentioning it and keep drumming, that tune. I also would suggest that maybe at one point in time, the cities of the North County would get together and talk about common things that they needed to do, and they would approach both NCTD and SANDAC with those. I think power comes in numbers. So those are just some thoughts, Tom, but it looks really exciting what you all are doing out there, and it's great to see you.
Thank you, committee member. And just one comment on that. So regarding flexible fleet options and what that may look like, I'd ask you if you want to search the internet. And I worked for a prior agency, the city of San Clemente. And in that, we started a beta test program, and it was called SC Rides for San Clemente Rides. And it basically was a beta test program to address 2 terminated bus routes because they had really low bus ridership, just as you mentioned, empty buses. And we implemented that rideshare program, and we secured a contract with Lyft and another vendor regarding paratransit rides. Very successful. It's very doable with all technology today, with geofencing and the iPhone capabilities. And the ridership went from under 100 for the bus routes to over 200, and it did very well through COVID, and it's still going up. So that's what it could look like, and it could be that and so much more. Thank you. And we are approaching SANDAG staff and our neighboring cities as well. And so we are pursuing innovative ideas, and hopefully we'll be back to present on those in the future. So thank you for that comment.
Much success on it, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orso. Tom, again, thank you for the presentation. There's a couple of things that I wanted to point out as well. First of all, you said your general plan is in line with the regional plan, which is really important. Whatever this new adopted plan is and how it will get implemented, really all jurisdictions need to be on board with that for this to work, because it is regional and it impacts every city in this region. So I'm glad to hear that you are supportive of that. I do also want to let you know that Italk is working on an amendment to its makeup, basically, to include 2 additional members, one of whom is going to be more of a technology-oriented person, someone with that background. So I think the addition of someone like that to the committee will help us better understand all of these types of opportunities and alternatives that are available, and gives us a little bit more perspective on what really is the right solution. And just, keep in mind that the right solution has to fit everyone, and not just commuters of City of Carlsbad. I do recognize your statistics that you provided, but also I'm thinking, well, the COVID, the impact was harder on public transportation because of the danger of transmittal of the disease and things like that. So of course that bounces back to me a little bit. It takes longer for it to bounce back. But I look at when it was working, 1.4 million people were off the highway as well. So you could see the challenge that SANDAG and Italk will have in making sure that we meet the needs of every commuter in this region and every traveler in this region. So I just want you to keep that in mind. I do encourage SANDAG staff to work with the mobility working group, and I think they are doing that. This is one of the reasons why the whole adoption or amendment to the transit program has been postponed, so that SANDAG is able to work with everyone and get consensus on really what's the right program to move forward with. So just a few things to keep in mind. And I see Mr. Kenny's hand is up. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, thanks for the presentation, and thanks for the kind words about the Italk members. There is currently a limitation on how much TransNet money can be spent on maintenance. And I know that maintenance is a challenge for agencies as the gas tax revenue starts to diminish with better mileage and electric vehicles. If through a TransNet ordinance that percentage was increased in favor of more maintenance, you got more maintenance money, would that be valuable to the city of Carlsbad? And would you support that in an amendment?
I know that's being discussed, and I'd like to analyze that further before I make a statement on it, but I can tell you that we're able to work within either criteria or, either way. Obviously, we've been managing our funds with the current criteria, but we are, so I guess I'll hold my comment on that, but we are looking at our position on that point.
Very good. I don't see any other hands raised. And Tom, you were perfect. Your timing was great. Again, I appreciate you coming in. I'm so sorry I missed you, but hopefully we'll meet soon. And please continue to get engaged in this conversation. It's important that every jurisdiction is involved so that we really prepare the right solution for hopefully to meet the needs of everyone as much as possible, which I think is a very tough task to do. So with that, I'm going to move on to item number 8, which is the triennial performance audit, draft scope of work and schedule. And Zara is going to present that item.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair, House and committee members. I'm Zara Sadegian with SANDAG's Financial Planning, Budgeting, and Grant Department. Per the extension ordinance, one of the responsibilities of the Italk is to conduct triennial performance audits of SANDAG and agencies involved in the implementation of TransNet-funded programs and projects to review project delivery, cost control, and schedule adherence. The performance audits are intended to examine performance over a 3-year period and consider recommendations to various processes, including contracting, construction, permitting, and other related processes to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of TransNet expenditures. The Italk has conducted 5 triennial performance audits since FY 2009. The audits included a review of TransNet activities and have focused on the implementation of the TransNet Early Action Program and included a review of the performance of SANDAG, Caltrans, San Diego Metropolitan TransNet System, North County Transit District, the City of San Diego, County of San Diego, a representative sample of various local jurisdictions, and the Italk, as well as a review of the implementation of recommendations from the most recently conducted audits. The 6th audit, covering fiscal years 2021 through 2023, will be due in fiscal year 2024. And in order to meet the timeline, an RFP process needs to be initiated no later than fiscal year 2023. The Italk appointed the FY 2024 TransNet Triennial Performance Audit Subcommittee as at its March 9, 2022 meeting, which includes 3 Italk voting members: Vice Chair Stuart Halpern, Mr. Pedro Orso Delgado, and Mr. Jonathan Frankel. Ms. Tracy Drager, the County Auditor and Controller, also serves on the committee as a non-voting member. A draft scope of work and schedule has been prepared by the subcommittee for your review and approval. Today, the Italk is asked to approve the scope of work for the FY 2024 TransNet Triennial Performance Audit request for proposal to solicit an independent consultant to conduct the 6th audit on behalf of the Italk. That concludes our presentation. We would be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, Zara. Let me first ask if there are any members of the public that may have comments.
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. This is an approval item, so I will be asking for a motion and a second. But before I do that, are there any members of Italk that have questions or comments about this topic? I don't see any hands. So one comment that I had, and I think it's broad enough, the topic is broad enough to cover this, but I would hope that eventually when the triennial audit happens, that the auditors do look at some of the SANDAG processes for consultant selection and onboarding with execution of contracts and things like that to see if there's any way to improve that process. So is there someone that would like to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Halpern. Anyone wants to second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Orso. Clerk, please go ahead. I guess there's really no discussion. I did ask for that. So let's go ahead and take a vote.
Thank you, Chair. For CEO Private Sector, Chair House.
I approve.
For Finance and Budgeting, Vice Chair Halpern.
Approve.
For Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition, Jonathan Frankel.
Frankel, approve.
Biology, Environmental, and Licensed Engineer are both absent. For Licensed Civil Traffic Engineer, Michael Kenny.
Approve.
And for Contractor Construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Thank you, and that item passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you, Clerk, and thank you, Italk members. Let's move on. We're doing good on time. Let's move on to item number 9, which is appointment of the FY22 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee members, and Marcus is here to present on that topic.
Yes, good morning, Chair and members of the Italk. I'm Marcus Pasquale in Finance, joined by my colleague, Charbel Muanis. Our item is to appoint the FY22 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee members. So before we appoint the members, Charbel is going to give us some background and timelines.
Good morning, Chair House and committee members. My name is Charbel Moanis with the Finance Department with Sandag. The TransNet FY22 fiscal and compliance audit process is scheduled to begin in July. The Italk is asked to appoint no more than 3 voting members to serve on this FY22 fiscal and compliance audit subcommittee. Please note this is not to be confused with the RFP subcommittee appointed at the March 9th Italk meeting. Generally, the draft FY22 agreed upon procedures are sent to the auditors. The auditors will then incorporate any updates or changes they may have. The auditors will then forward these changes to the subcommittee members for review, comments, or updates as needed. The final AUP will then be presented to Italk on the July 13th meeting. The FY21 subcommittee members were Stuart Halpern, Chair Sunny House, and Jonathan Frankel. At this time, do we have 3 volunteers for the fiscal year 2022 subcommittee?
Okay, are there any volunteers? Mr. Halford, yay! Your hand is up. Go ahead. You're gonna volunteer to serve again?
I'm happy to do it again. No problem. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much for stepping up. All right. Any other members of Italk that would like to serve? Miss Tracy Drager. Thank you. Okay.
I just want to say I'm not a voting member, but if that's not an issue, I definitely will participate.
Absolutely. We welcome you. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to serve on this? We do need 3 voting members, right? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Mr. Orso, would you like to serve as well?
Would like to give the opportunity to anyone else to do that, but if not, I will.
Well, we do need 3 voting members, so we're still too short. Tracy is kind enough to also serve, but she's not a voting member, so I believe we need 2 more members. So thank you for stepping up and doing that. Let's see, is there anyone else that would like to have this opportunity?
Chair, it's Mike Kenny. I'll be happy to do it. And the next time we ask for volunteers for a subcommittee, could we have a graphic of all the subcommittees and who's on what so we can shame the right people?
That's an excellent idea, Mike.
Is that, I'm sorry, that should be part of the motion.
You can always volunteer those that are not here today as well. But there will be other committees. Don't worry. There's a lot of opportunity to serve. Okay, so Ms. Drager, did you have a comment? I know you had your hand up again, but was it just to get it? You had not.
No, I forgot to put it down. Sorry.
Thank you. No problem. Okay, so we do have 3 members from what I understand. And clerk, if you want to maybe, actually we need a motion, right? Because this is an appointment. So we need a motion to basically appoint Mr. Halpern, Mr. Orso, Ms. Drager, and Mr. Kenny to the 2022 Fiscal and Compliance Audit Subcommittee. Anyone would like to make a motion? Jonathan, would you like to make the motion?
Sure, I'd be happy to make the motion to appoint Mr. Orso, Mr. Halpern, Ms. Drager, and Mr. Kenny to the fiscal year 22 audit subcommittee.
And if I can make a second myself, since the other subcommittee members are all on the committee, I would second the motion. Is that possible? Clerk, is that okay?
Yes, that should be acceptable. And I just wanted to note for the record also that we have no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. I did not see any hands, but I forgot to ask. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Clerk, please go ahead and take a vote.
Thank you very much, Chair. For CEO Private Sector, Chair House.
Approved.
For Finance and Budgeting, Vice Chair Halpern.
Approve.
For Real Estate Right-of-Way Acquisition, Jonathan Frankel.
Approve.
Biology, environmental, and licensed engineer are both absent. For licensed civil traffic engineer, Michael Kenny.
Approved.
And for contractor construction, Pedro Orso Delgado.
Yes.
Thank you. And that item passes unanimously with those members present.
Very well. Thank you very much, everyone who volunteered. We really, really appreciate your support. And let's move on to item number 10. We're doing good on time still. And this is going to be Office of Independent Auditor Risk Discussion Process. Mary, and is it Khush Mashrab? Is that your last name? You're on mute.
Hi. Oh, sorry, I hope you can hear me. I was in between my phone call as well as here because I'm having some connection difficulties. So I had asked them to connect me to the phone, but they didn't do that. So can I be heard
Yes,
easily by people?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm unable to hear you. So let me see. Okay. I'm sorry. There we go.
Okay, you can hear us now?
Hear you now. So I may disconnect, and if I do, I will call in. I was invited to quickly give you some overview of the risk discussion process that I have before I do my annual audit plan for the next fiscal year. So I wanted to briefly describe what the process is and also invite members of this committee to have a risk discussion with me. As you all know, under AB 805, it's my responsibility to work cooperatively and jointly with all other auditors within SANDAG to ensure that we're basically doing the best bang for our buck, that we are being efficient and effective around our audit processes and not overlapping where we don't need to overlap. The discussion consists primarily of setting up meetings, about a 45-minute discussion with each board member and each member of the audit committee, as well as about 7 executive team members of management. The risk discussion, I have a panel of questions that I ask, mainly around discussions with management around risk themes, which is public perception risk, budget risk, political risk, really a wide range of all risk themes is discussed with various members. I also ask about the understanding of SANDAG's mandated responsibilities by board members and audit committee members, if they have a good understanding of that, versus the tools that are used to help carry out those mandates, as well as other projects that SANDAG does that are not necessarily mandated, but are for the good of the community. So these are all considered and taken into consideration around this discussion. In addition to that, I share with them from the audit perspective where we've identified risk and how we intend to incorporate those considerations into the audit plan. And then I really leave it open for discussion with the members or management and board members, as well as public members of the audit committee, to have a discussion about what kind of keeps them up at night around matters relating to SANDAG. And with that, I take those discussions into consideration, look where there's some pattern of consistency among members, and see how I can incorporate those considerations of risk into the next fiscal year's audit plan. I am really proud and happy to share that last year we had about a 50% participation by board members. So really only 50%. And I think it was just getting used to OPA and our environment and our culture being very different. It's never been before. But this year I am happy to announce that we had 87% participation. So it was really a nice, pleasant surprise. And the meetings and discussions were plentiful. They were, very good discussions. They were considerate. They weren't just there to say they were there. So I was really pleased with the outcome. So with that, I again invite you to have these discussions with me if you'd like to. We are wrapping them up as I have to have the plan out by June. But I do invite you to reach out to me and have that discussion with me, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you so much, Mary. Are there any members of the public that have any comments or questions?
No public comments on this item.
Okay, members of Italk, are there any comments or questions? Mr. Halpern.
Thanks. Just one thing very quickly, Mary. I don't know if you heard in our last agenda item, Chair House referenced interest in consulting, contracting process in a prior subcommittee meeting around the upcoming TPA. I think my colleague Pedro Orso Delgado also talked about issues relating to contractors, et cetera. Is there anything you could just briefly talk about the current audit I believe you're doing that touches on that topic that might help inform them and their particular interests and questions?
Yes, thank you, Stuart. We are in the middle. We just started about a month or so ago in a contracts audit, and the audit consists of two parts. It consists of looking at the policies, procedures, and practices and controls internally around contracts and procurement. We look at the bidding process, the RFP process to ensure that we're following standards and regulations and rules. We look to ensure that they had good controls in place. We're looking at the entire process around the scopes to ensure that they're not too general. We're looking at the number of amendments that were created per consulting, and also how often we go out for RFP versus using individuals on the bench. And so that's sort of part one. Part two will look at the impacts of the processes and controls that we have in place around the contractors, and if there's any, misuse or abuse or inefficiencies around that part. So it's really a large audit, and it consists of two parts for a reason. We don't want to overwhelm the reader, and we want to and don't want findings that are important to be lost. So it will be two parts, and our gear is to really look internally first to see how we're doing and if we're following, the OMBs and everything that we should be following around federal grants and state grants. And then we look outside at the contractors and how they're performing towards us as SANDAG, as their client.
Mary, before I go to Mr. Orso, I just wanted to kind of clarify my comment, and I don't know if this is covered. I did not hear this part. I was more referencing the length of time it takes for SANDAG to bring consultants on board. I know consultants who have been selected, or the selection has been announced to, at least for negotiations, and they're months and months and months. They're struggling to keep their staff on board to service SANDAG because it's taking so long on this next round of contracts that are coming up. Is that something that's covered under your audit?
Yes, it is. So I shared with you that we're looking at the processes around RFPs and bidding and everything. And we have identified some inefficiencies in that area and why it's taking sometimes 6 to 9 months. So yes, that is definitely covered. We are looking at controls, for example, to make sure everybody's kind of staying in their own lane. So project managers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, contractors, analysts are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and finance is doing what finance is supposed to be doing. And as you can imagine, if those lines get smeared, there can become a level of inefficiencies that happen, which delays processes. So we are addressing them, and yes, that is one of the areas that we will definitely be addressing in the audit.
Perfect, thanks for the clarification. Mr. Orso.
I applaud the efforts that you're mentioning, Mary, and you were asking what keeps you up at night. And one of the things that to me, and I brought it up like Stuart mentioned and Sonny mentioned, the whole issue about the amount of money that is spent on contracts, both construction contracts, planning level contracts, design level contracts, and the consultants that are being used. And it's something that, I don't know the exact amount of money, but I venture to say that maybe 80% or more goes out to all of these entities. So, if you use the 90-10 rule or 80-20 rule, that's an area that you need to really, really focus. So my applaud to that. My concern has been one, like Chair House mentioned, the amount of time that it takes. The other concern that I have is not only the amount of time that it takes, but once a consultant has a contract on board, the checks and balances that we have, Sandag has, the staff available so that it doesn't, and I'm going to say it in a colloquial way, the tail wagging the dog, where the consultant is telling the Sandag staff, this is what you need to do, and not the other way around. And that has always been a big concern of mine wherever I have been, either working or serving as a committee member.
Yes, a very good point, and we are looking at that actually. One thing about government is when government gives up resources to have consultants or contractors perform the duties instead of internally by a government employee, we also give up a level of control. And we have to work really hard to make sure we keep that control, right? That we're the base of the control and that they are actually working for us, not reverse. One of the processes that we're looking at is the use of resources externally. So if we have internal individuals that are able to perform duties, we're looking at how much are we going out and having consultants perform instead of employees, because then that's almost like double cost, right? If we have employees that are capable of performing the duties and we're consulting them out, the question is why? And so, and also again, the question is who's running the show? Is it Sandag or is it the consultant? And if it's the consultant, why? And so we are looking at, for example, are there comfortable consultants that have benefited from consulting with Sandag for many years and there's a comfort level there? And as a result of that comfort level, have we given them more control than they should have? And so we are looking at that, and we will be reporting that out as well, which is why I shared there's two parts to this audit, because it is going to be, we really want to make sure that the findings represent what we're doing internally to create a problem or to solve a problem, and what we're doing externally, the impacts of that.
I appreciate that, and I think I'm going to start sleeping a lot better.
Well, she has to finish her audit first, though.
Yes.
This is so true, but somebody is looking into it.
Mary,
thank
you so much for this information. You have extended an invitation for Italk members to connect with you. How is that going to be done? Are you able to follow up individually with members of Italk? Give us a little bit more information on that.
So I can send an invitation out to all members of Italk, and they can accept the invitation or reject it, or they can contact me, whatever's preferred. But I can definitely have to all the members, I can send an invite.
If you could please do that, that way the conversation can continue and maybe information can be shared. But thank you again for being here. Appreciate
You're welcome.
The presentation.
Your house,
yes.
At the risk of being the kid at the front of the classroom saying, oh no, let's be careful with the Brown Act rules as far as how we reach out to Mary in that sense.
I'm going to leave that up to Mary to follow the process and to make sure we do not, just like she's talking to the board members. I think as long as the Brown Act rules are followed, if this is possible, then please go ahead and get that done. Thank you.
Yes, some real quick, sorry, just to clarify that, Eric, because I know that is a concern and that's a good point. how this, I do reach out individually, so there's no discussion there. And then the conversations are confidential and part of the audit standards and practices and processes. So we're good there.
That's
Thank
what
you.
I thought, but I'm glad you brought it up, Orso. Pedro, thank you so much. All right, let's move on. We're on item number 11, Draft 2023 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. These are proposed TransNet project listing that was included in your board packet. And I believe Richard Ratcliffe is here to present on that.
Yes, good morning, Chair, and thank you. And good morning, Italk members. So SANDAG serves as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the San Diego region, and is required by state and federal laws to develop and adopt a Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. The RTIP is a 5-year program of proposed major transportation projects that includes the TransNet program of projects. Today, we are presenting a preliminary draft listing of the proposed TransNet program of projects for the 2023 RTIP update, which will cover fiscal years 2023 through 2027. Included in this agenda item is also some information about the 2023 RTIP and the upcoming schedule. Attachment 1 provides a listing of the 15 new TransNet funded projects which are proposed to be programmed in the 2023 RTIP. Attachment 2 provides a listing of all the TransNet funded projects proposed for programming in the 23 RTIP. Signed council resolutions are due to SANDAG from local agencies by July 1st for their projects to be included in the RTIP. For SANDAG and Caltrans projects, project changes are dependent on approval of the FY 2023 SANDAG program budget, which is scheduled to be approved on May 27th, 2022 by the SANDAG board. Attachment 3 provides a cumulative capacity analysis of revenue versus programming for TransNet Local Street Improvement, or LSI funds, for the draft 2023 RTIP for all local agencies. And attachment 4 is a map highlighting the approximate locations for the 15 new TransNet funded projects. We're presenting this item to you today for your review and discussion. The entire draft 2023 RTIP, including its air quality conformity analysis and draft air quality conformity redetermination of San Diego Forward, the 2021 regional plan, will be presented to you at the July 13th Italk meeting for review and discussion. The final 2023 RTIP will be presented to you for discussion, as well as an additional opportunity for comments in September. And pending the Transportation Committee's recommendation, the Board of Directors will be asked to adopt the final 2023 RTIP and make its air quality conformity determination at the September 23rd, 2022 meeting. That concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ratcliffe. Are there any public comments, Clerk?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Mr. Halpern, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about attachment 3. It's just laden with yellow highlighting, and if somebody could address that, I think that would be very helpful. I see the chair is nodding as well. That probably was her question.
That was my question too.
Yeah, so no surprise there. What happened is the recently approved revenue estimates actually came in higher, and agencies had already programmed their projects and submitted them for our review and approval. And so they have not yet had an opportunity to update their programming in the 23 RTIP to align with the new updates. And that will happen, I believe it's in July, once the draft has already been out and we kind of have an opportunity to make those updates before the final.
Okay, so this will change and you have hopefully a better, less yellow on there.
Yes, much less yellow, yes.
Mr. Orso, do you have a comment? Go ahead.
That brings up a dumb question on my part. If that's the case, do you anticipate a delta, either a plus or minus of the money that's going to be needed?
No, as far as the TransNet goes, the TransNet it's coming in more than was originally anticipated. So essentially the percentage programmed here would actually increase and to align with the revenues. Are you referring to another fund source?
No.
The TransNet?
It would be the TransNet, which is our purview, only.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's somebody else that could better answer that question.
Yeah, I think the answer to that is that the agencies can only program what's available, right?
Yes.
So
Right.
they would only be allowed to program to the, oh, and I see Sue. Sue's the expert, so let's let her answer too.
Right. What Ariana is saying is true. We had given the agencies a revenue limit that based on the prior estimate that was approved by the board in February that they could program to. And then Ariana took an item back to the board last month to increase that revenue based on the incoming TransNet sales tax. So we have provided that increased estimate to local agencies and asked them to revise their programming up to that limit.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Frankel, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair House, and thank you, Richard. And forgive me, this is the kind of first full RTIP update that I'm seeing as a member of the committee. So forgive me if this is a relatively basic question as I'm reviewing the materials. But I noticed that for certain jurisdictions, especially the city of Carlsbad, the LSI carryover funds represent a large portion of the kind of stack of funds that they're using. And so when you're seeing them use carryover funds pretty consistently, is that because and I see the definition in the notation that it was not requested or allocated in the fiscal year previously programmed, but does that mean or represent that the city is either not moving as quickly as they thought on certain projects, either they're not requesting it or Sandag isn't allocating it? I'm just wondering why there's so many carryover funds, particularly for the city of Carlsbad.
Is Tom still in the room? That's a good question. We do encourage agencies to program and use their carryover funds first because those are the older money, but we can't force them to. And yeah, Carlsbad has been slow to draw down some of their funds.
Whatever it's worth, I know in the past when we've had discussions like this, sometimes it's the case that a city will say that they're saving up for some particular big projects. I don't know that that's the case here in Carlsbad, but I know in some cases that's been the answer in the past. But it's good. It's always good to point that out because we're here to represent the taxpayer, and the taxpayer wants the funds spent.
Yeah, we'll reach out and try to get a better explanation from the city. I don't know that we have one right now.
Thank you, Ms. Alpert. I think that would be good to follow up on.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a question about, the fact that there was so much yellow. It looks like there's more opportunity for funding. Does that mean then a percentage of or the number of your new projects may increase by adding more projects, or how would the extra funds would be used?
No, we can't add more projects at this time. It would basically just be the amount of revenue that they have programmed would increase.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll likely apply the funds to some of their overlay projects and possibly swap out local funds for TransNet.
I see. And then again, I'm new to this as still, I'm learning. How do you decide that on the new projects? Are the jurisdictions are all submitting and someone goes through and figures out what is meets the program needs? How would you make that selection?
That is kind of part of what you said is kind of it takes place at the local jurisdictional level. But as long as they essentially, fall in line with the TransNet ordinance, they're pretty much assumed to be eligible from our end, okay. As well as, as long as they're eligible according to federal and state funds too.
Okay, very good. Any other questions, comments? Looks like we're good. Thank you, Mr. Radcliffe. Thank you, Ms. Alpert. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the draft 2022 Italk annual report. This item is going to have to be approved by next month, so go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair House. Good morning again, ITALK members. I'm here today to present to you the FY 2022 ITALK Annual Report. At its January 12, 2022 meeting, the ITALK appointed a 2022 ITALK Annual Report Subcommittee consisting of Chair House, Mr. Pedro Orso Delgado, and Mr. Les Hopper. The subcommittee has completed its first draft of the annual report for your consideration. The annual report includes a letter from the ITALK chair, which briefly addresses the new direction at Sandag with this regional plan and emphasizes ITALK's commitment to transparency and accountability for projects funded by the TransNet and its efforts to achieve consistency with the regional plan as the ordinance requires. Pages 2 and 3 of the report include the ITALK and Sandag goals for FY 2022 and a status update for each goal. Starting from page 4, the report includes the results of the most recent triennial performance audits that were conducted in FY 2018 and FY 2021, the critical recommendations and key results listed on the executive summary. On page 6, the key results of your FY 2021 fiscal audit are provided. Other report highlights include TransNet funding highlights on page 7 and TransNet dollars compared with other fund sources and a breakdown of funding by TransNet subprogram. And lastly, progress highlights on priority and high-profile projects are provided starting from page 8 of the report with description on accomplishments and upcoming milestones. Today, what we are asking from the committee is to provide any feedback or comments on the report as we are anticipating presenting the final report for the ITALK approval on June 14th. The annual report presentation to the board is scheduled for June 24, 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Zara. And are there any public comments on this item?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you, Clerk. How about members of Italk? Are there any comments, questions for members of Italk? Mr. Halpert.
Thanks. Two things. First, I'm not sure if it's the new committee or if we have some new staff or consultants engaged on this project, but I think this is the best looking draft annual that I've seen in, I think, the 9 years that I've been involved in ITALK. Really, seriously, really an excellent job of taking a lot of information and communicating it in a very graphically efficient way. So I think it looks great. And so I just wanted to say that. Second thing I had is a request, and this actually came from somebody I was having a conversation with. I won't bore you with all the details, but for sake of sort of transparency, accountability, it was suggested to me that we include in the portion, maybe perhaps under the ITALK members, we just reference the number of times that the ITALK has met during the year, and we for transparency show how many of the meetings each of the members has attended.
So you're suggesting to add that to the report as far as attendance by the ITALK members?
Yeah, two things. First, just to demonstrate to the public that we don't just meet, here and there. Right? We're fairly rigorous in meeting, 10 to 11 times a year. So I think, disclosing that just to help the public understand. But then, and then just go into a little bit more. The analogy, and I come from the private sector, and a lot of friends have that reference. In the annual proxy reports of publicly listed corporations, when they reference the board of directors who's on the board, one of the things that's disclosed is the number of meetings, the number of board meetings that took place during the year, the number of meetings each member attended. And so it's been suggested to me that that would be a useful transparency to add to our annual report as well.
Okay, we do have a subcommittee meeting after this. I think we can discuss a little bit further, Mr. Halpern, and decide how we would do that. You know, there's a lot of activity, especially this year with subcommittees and a lot of member engagement. So it's a good idea, but we should see how we can accomplish that. Thanks for the comment.
Sure. And good job, committee and staff.
Thank you. Anyone else? I do want to echo Mr. Halpern's comment. I don't want to take credit for it. I think Sandex staff and the team who is supporting this did a fantastic job in really reorganizing and graphically making this as easy as possible to read. So thank you. And then thank you to the subcommittee members who participated in this as well. So are there any other comments? I don't see any other hands. I think we will have, Ariana, we'll have a brief meeting after this for the subcommittee to just kind of finalize the process, and we'll go with that. So, okay. Yes.
Immediately after this?
Yeah, it is after our meeting. We have a meeting scheduled already on the agenda.
No, I understand that. And at the risk of jinxing this, it seems to me that we may be finishing early.
No, I'm sorry. This is we will keep our meeting timeline, which is 12 o'clock.
A bummer.
Thank you for the correction. Ms. Drager.
Hi, sorry, just a typo that I saw just glancing through on page 7 of the report on the chart.
Okay.
Where it gives title bicycle, pedestrian, and neighborhood safety, it's got a misspelling of pedestrian.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see that. Thank you.
We'll make a note of that. Okay. Well, very well. Thank you so much. We will finalize this. It will come back to the committee next month for final approval and then distribution. So, okay, let's move on now. We're doing good on time. Quarterly TransNet, this is item number 13. Quarterly TransNet financial report for the period ending March 31st, 2022. And Mr. Dujon and Mr. Pasquale are going to be presenting.
Yes, hello, good morning, members of Italk. My name is Marcus Pasquale, and I've prepared the quarterly TransNet financial report for quarter 3 based on recommendations from the first and second TransNet triennial performance audits. In the interest of time, I will just be doing an overview and highlights, but can go into depth on any of the attachments if needed. So some key considerations this quarter: our debt to revenue is at 3.63 times, meaning for every $1 of debt service, we have $3.63 of TransNet revenue, providing ample coverage. Cumulative fiscal year sales tax revenues through March 2022 came in 24.3% higher when compared to last fiscal year through March. And those figures come in at $305 million through March in FY22 compared to $245 million through March in FY21. For quarter 3 alone, we have $104.6 million in FY22 and $81.9 million in FY21, or about a 28% increase. All cities and the county are within the allowable 30% maintenance limitation as required by the ordinance. So thank you, Chair and members of the Italk. That will conclude my presentation, and I will turn it back over to Chair House in case there are any questions on any of the attachments.
Thank you, Mr. Pasquale. Good brief report. Any comments or questions from the members of public?
There are no public comments on this item.
Very well. Any ITAC members have comments, questions? Mr. Orso.
My question is related to the future. Expenditures and projections. It looks to me that, you know, we are, I don't know what call it a recession or what, but it looks like it's taking hold, and everything is starting to cost more in the future. So I don't know. I'm assuming you all have done some projections of how that would impact our debt service that we currently have, and the potential for a lot of our projects to also increase in cost.
Yeah, if I can take that question, Chair. So that's a great point, and that's something that does concern us. I mean, it's great that our revenues are up. They're up 23% year to date, and that's something that we've never had. The biggest gain we've ever had is approximately a 10% increase. That was back in 1997. We had a 9.2% increase just last year, and we're up, 23% this year. So from the revenue side, it's kind of a surprise. It's obviously a very pleasant surprise. But that being said, we know that the costs are certainly going to increase as well. So what we're doing right now, we've started our annual plan of finance, which we work with our financial advisors of PFM, and we also work very closely with all our project managers to update their costs. So the revenue side, we're great. The cost side is something that we're taking a closer look at, and we'll probably have the plan of finance completed sometime in the fall that we'll be bringing back to the Italk and as well as the Board of Directors.
Thank you, sir.
Very good. Thank you for the response. That was my concern as well. So with resources and cost and everything going up, I think we're going to see a big uptick on bids as well. So, okay, we're moving on to item number 14. Let's see, 14. And that's overview, and I keep losing my overview of development in the financial markets quarterly finance report for as of March, and Mr. Dujon and Mr. Miller are listed for me here.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So this is an informational item on the financial markets that we bring to you on a quarterly basis, and this report is based on the third quarter for fiscal year 22 as of March 30th, 22. So this is a fairly lengthy report that we go through our entire debt and investment portfolio. The same report goes to the Board of Directors, and then we post it to our investor relations website for the benefit of interested parties, including the rating agencies. I know that you're all busy, so I suggest that you can focus on the first page summary that we present, and then my oral report today will kind of go on the highlights and what's changed from the prior quarter and currently what we're working on. And after me, Marsha will present an update on the state of our local and national economy and give you an update on our sales tax collections. So there was only one significant change that we had in our report this quarter, and that is that, currently we have a commercial paper program that we're approximately 50% drawn on. We went ahead and initiated a new revolver for $100 million with US Bank, who's our commercial bank. And the main reason why we did this is just to have a little extra cash available. There's a lot of excess state funds that are potentially out there, as well as the IIJA, the federal funding. And so we just want to make sure that we have local dollars to match programs that could potentially come our way. I mean, we do have cash in the bank, but a lot of it is committed to programs. So we need to have some free cash, if you will, to match particular programs that we want to take advantage of. We are certainly pleased that last year, this time, we took advantage of the low interest rate environment. We refinanced a number of our outstanding loans. We also refinanced our undrawn TIFIA loan. Our initial TIFIA rate when we took it out was 2.72%, which is kind of tied to the 30-year Treasury. Back last year, we refinanced it down to 1.72%. And just to give you an idea, today, the 30-year Treasury is over 3%. So the rate that we have today is almost half if we were to take out that loan today. So we've seen a tremendous increase in interest rates over the last 3 months. In fact, some of our Wall Street firms say that they have never seen an increase so fast and furious like we have over the last 3 months. But the good news for us is that our portfolio, over 90%, 95% of it is fixed. So we're not really worried about interest rates going up. Certainly our commercial paper is variable rate, but that's only approximately 5% of our portfolio. The one thing that's kind of positive to this inflation story, if any, is obviously, as I just mentioned, our sales tax increasing the way it has, over 23% year to date. But with that, as also mentioned, we'll be taking a closer look at our costs to see how much of that is going to go towards increased costs. Looking at our investments, there's $970 million that we currently have outstanding with approximately a 0.56% return. This is a slight increase over the 0.47% that we had last quarter. And actually, this is the first time that we've seen our investments increase in rates since the Feds slashed rates back in, I think it was March of 2020 based on COVID. So we're at 0.56%, but the Fed has obviously just raised rates twice so far this year, 0.25% a couple months ago, and just half a basis point just last week. And some people think, some Wall Street firms think there may be 4 to 5 other increases this year. So we probably will see at least a 1% investment return probably by the end of this year. Again, I think Marcus mentioned it, but the one positive also is from this report is the 3.63 coverage ratio. Pre-COVID, we were at 3 times coverage. Now we're at 3.63 coverage, which is a 21% increase. Again, the 2 reasons for that is we took advantage and refinanced some of our loans to a lower amount, and also obviously with the increased sales tax. So our AAA ratings are certainly secure, and won't see that change anytime soon. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Marcia, and also a welcome to Marcia. She's the newest economic person on our team. You've probably heard Ray Major in the past, Jim Miller. So now you'll start hearing from Marcia. So I'll turn it over to her, and she'll kind of give us a more deeper dive into the economy and our sales tax numbers.
Thank you, Marcia. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Andre. Good morning, Chair House and committee members. My name is Marcia Smith. I'm an Associate Economic Research Analyst here at SANDAG, and I'll provide a brief overview of our current economic conditions. I'm going to start with our economy's vital signs. Since the pandemic, the U.S. real gross domestic product has rebounded. But in the first quarter of 2022, the economy shrank 1.4% on an annualized basis. This contraction was largely due to decreases in business inventory and net exports. We're importing more goods than we're exporting. But even with this sluggish start to the GDP measures, economists remain fairly optimistic. Consumers are still spending, businesses are still investing, our housing market is tight, our labor market is tight. 428,000 jobs were added in April. There are record job openings. Unemployment is holding steady at 3.6, and wages are going up. The Philadelphia Federal Reserve Bank's survey of professional forecasters still project a 3.7% increase in U.S. real GDP growth in 2022. We seem in pretty good shape, except for what's on the top of mind of most Americans and the top domestic priority for President Biden, rising prices. Inflation, which was updated this morning with the April Consumer Price Index report, is at 8.3%, which is slightly eased from March's 8.5%, which was the highest in 40 years. Much of the inflation comes from the pandemic-related mismatch of our surging demand for durable goods and the supply chain snarls that are due to shortages in labor and parts. The supply side issues will persist. Pandemic outbreaks have led to lockdowns in production and shipping centers in China, which still pursues a zero COVID policy. Also, the Russian war in Ukraine stretches into its 3rd month, affecting global markets for crude oil, grain, and metals. To tamp down on inflation, as Andre had mentioned, the Federal Reserve has stepped in twice in the last 2 months or 3 months to raise its benchmark rate. First, 1/4 percentage point in March, and then 1/2 percentage point this past week. Raising rates is a blunt demand-side tool. It increases the cost of borrowing and affects mortgage rates, car loans, credit cards, anything you want to finance. So we expect that to have some radiating effects throughout the economy. Investors on Wall Street aren't sure what to make of it all the time, and we've seen the volatility in stock prices. There's a lot of uncertainty right now on whether the Fed can thread the needle to stabilize prices and slow the economy without stalling it into recession. In San Diego, obviously, inflation is also on our minds and dominates our headlines. Prior to the pandemic, we had a decade of around 2% price growth from year to year. In January of this year, we hit 8.2%, our highest surge in 40 years. The March report had inflation at 7.9 for us compared to a year ago. Still, everyone's feeling this because the skyrocketing prices have been hitting the goods that people most need to buy. Everything from grocery store prices to gas stations. Food prices advanced 10%. Energy prices jumped 36%, largely from the sharp spikes in gas, which topped out at $6.19 in March and just posted a record for diesel earlier this week at $6.47 per gallon. How can we keep up? Wages are increasing, up 10% nominally in some sectors, but the gains now, for now anyway, have been largely washed away by our rising cost of living. Regional unemployment, 3.4% in March, has returned to its low pre-pandemic levels. Home prices, though, have gone stratospheric, with the median price of a single-family detached home now at $950,000, up 40% from pre-pandemic levels in March 2020. Combine that with rising mortgage rates, which are now a little bit over 5.25% for a 30-year fixed loan, and only 15% of San Diegans can afford to buy a house. We at Sandag are continuing to monitor how the effects of the evolving pandemic, supply chain bottlenecks, rising prices, war in Ukraine, and other factors move through our economy. So far, consumer demand and spending have remained elevated, even amid the high prices. This bodes well, as Andre had said and Marcus had also said, for TransNet revenues, which are on pace to top $400 million this year. Counting April collections, we are currently at $336 million, already $2 million more than all of the collections in fiscal year 2021. And we have 2 months and the start of summer vacation left to count. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Smith, for your presentation. Are there any public comments on this topic?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, members of Italk, are there any questions, comments? Mr. Halpern.
Yeah, hi, I've got one for Ms. Smith. Welcome. And this is kind of a little bit of a nerdy economics kind of question, but you know, I'm wondering if you could comment at all on the issue that you mentioned, that interest rate increases are sort of a blunt instrument, which kind of goes to the heart of my question. It seems like a lot of what's driving inflation are things that we characterize somewhat as exogenous factors, right? You've got the Ukraine war, you've got the lockdown in China. It seems as if those are things that are unrelated to, you know, domestic economic fundamentals, really. And so I'm just wondering if there's some risk that the Fed's traditional tool of interest rates will end up being sort of overly blunt because they really don't relate very closely to the exogenous factors that are really driving the inflation.
Well, thank you for that question. That's a very astute observation. You're absolutely right. A lot of the a lot of the inflation that we're experiencing, at least right now, is related to the pandemic surges in demand, or the demand for durable goods that we all had while we were kind of pent up and working from home. And these expose largely supply chain problems in our system, coupled with the labor shortages from people being away from work. So yes, that is a supply side issue. The interest rates mostly affect demand, and they make it more expensive for people to borrow money and to spend wildly as we used to be. So I think you're right that the Fed is using kind of a demand side tool for what has largely been either an exogenous problem that has brought on some mostly supply side issues. And that's why there is all this uncertainty. They have a term called a soft landing, in which the Fed would like to be able to lower, to have price stability by using interest rates, and then be able to do that without tripping us into recession. We're hoping that they can do it this time, although their track record has only been 1 of 9.
Thanks for that optimism.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And Mr. Orso, you have a comment, question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. I see what happens here in California, and I compare it to other states. Recently, I was in Louisiana, and most recently in Texas. And just a key example, the price of gas in both Louisiana and Texas is about $2 less than what we're paying here in California. Somebody's going to tell me that it's because of all of the taxes, because of the different mix of fuel. But at the end of the day, it is my belief that, we end up paying more, and I'm not sure why. I really don't. I also know that we end up paying more for our services and our goods in a lot of ways. And right now, and I don't know if this is really the case, but I see folks taking advantage, and everything, they're raising prices, transportation's costing more and stuff like that. And they pin it on the extraneous issues that are happening, the supply chain, the war, and all of that. And I don't know how much of that is real and how much is artificially created, because we will accept that, and as a community, as a society. And at the same time, I don't know, and this is my fear, and this is my concern, is that I have never really seen prices go down as drastically as they have gone up, to adjust because those external factors have been corrected. And I don't know that it will happen. I think what will end up happening is that we will go into a do loop, that now the employers are going to be asking for more money to be able to pay for the goods and services that never actually went down. But I'm not sure that's a question, and more like a statement.
Okay, Ms. Smith, any response at all, or any, you're good?
I welcome you to join our research team.
Good. Maybe I can make up the lost income there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orso. Mr. Franco, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair House, and welcome, Ms. Smith. Thank you for your report. I think you characterized the rise in home prices as stratospheric, and I don't think that anybody would disagree with that. I think I'm interested in future reports. I mean, obviously, 15% of San Diegans able to afford a median-priced single-family home. That is shocking, and I think that I would be interested in seeing, as well as home prices, increases in rent. Now we see more and more San Diegans will be forced to rent, and I know that rents have also risen over this time period. I think it'd be an interesting data point, in addition to home prices, to see what rents are doing in the future as more and more people are out of home ownership.
That's an excellent point. As we've seen with the markets outside of single-family homes, we've seen condos, multifamily units, and townhomes rise 42% compared to the rise of single-family homes. And once we have limited inventory, we're going to see rents follow that higher prices as well. So yes, I'll include that in my future reports.
Thank you. I do have a question related to the plan of finance for future with the inflation. I don't know how soon you're looking at new loans, or, I know there were discussions about TIFIA loans and other things. How does this impact, or how soon is this going to, inflation rates and increase in interest rates are going to impact your finances?
Yeah, thanks, Chairhouse. So, like I mentioned earlier, we're just engaged with PFM to update the plan of finance. And again, from the revenue side, things are looking good. I think part of what the plan of finance for Sandag is a couple different things: is see how much our project costs are, how much they've gone up, and then also when we need a next round of bond financing. I think our existing plan of finance shows that we're going to the markets of January of next year. Depending on how much the costs go up, that may be a little bit earlier. But again, based on the fact that our revenues have gone up quite a bit as well, gives us, I'm sure, a little bit of leeway. But the commercial paper that we have, there's still $50 million outstanding. So generally, when we plan for a bond issuance, we use the commercial paper to the capacity, and then we issue the long-term debt and take out some of the commercial paper. So once the plan of finance comes out, we still have some tools in the tool shed, if you will. If we need to raise some money immediately, we have access to the commercial paper, but then generally for longer term, we go to bond financing, the longer term financing.
Very good. I think we've seen this in the past. I just want to make sure the engineering estimates that are coming in are reflective of all these new increases in inflation and resource issues and things like that. Sometimes that lags behind, and we see bids that come more than 20%, and then there's probably rebids or delays and things like that. So I hope that staff is on top of that with the industry to make sure we're getting really realistic bids for future construction projects. So thank you, Mr. Dujon. We are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item number 15, Otay Mesa East Port of Entry project. We're going to hear about financial strategy and delivery methods, and Ms. Molina, I believe, is going to give that presentation.
Hi, Chair. This is Mario Orso. I'm the Corridor Director.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Mario. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good, thank you.
I'll begin. Maria will be giving a portion of the presentation. I'll just give a quick overview. Andrea will go over the financial strategy, and Maria will go over what we have as delivery strategies. Can we go to the next slide? And I think, I'm the one moving it. I'm used to, well, I went over this, so it's pretty much what I just mentioned. Just briefly, the Otay Mesa East project is a corridor project. I can't remember the last time that I was at Italk. It's probably 5 to 6 years ago when we programmed some TransNet funds for the right-of-way acquisition, if my memory serves me right. The project, like I mentioned, corridor job that includes interchanges with the 125, 2.5 miles or 2 mile toll road facility, and the port of entry, as well as the commercial vehicle enforcement facility for the highway patrol, meaning that trucks cross the border, go through customs, and then they pass to a highway patrol facility to get checked out for their brakes or any other streets and highway codes requirements. We have invested about $592 million in the project. The roadways are they're pretty much finished. The objective was to do a systematic approach of the roadways with the port of entry, as well as an interconnection with all the other border crossings in the region. Out of the $592 million, you could see the breakdown, about 51% federal funds, 9% local, 40% state. The Mexican government is also building about a mile of a highway road that you could see in yellow, and also their port of entry. So we can go and see what a flyover, a simulation of what it is, State Route 11. This is basically already finished. You could see Enrico Fermi. It's a diverging diamond interchange that we had to do that, moves traffic on the opposite way to deal with the heavy truck moves, both from the existing port of entry and the future port of entry. You could see we're flying over some of the bridges we built. We're going to have the multi-lane highway. We're opening there to the toll plaza, and we're going over what we're building right now, the Siempre Viva interchange. So we're finished with the roadway, and we're now focused on delivering the port of entry. You could see we've acquired 100 acres, 120 acres, 20 acres for the state facility, which is the odd-shaped oval, and then we have the actual federal compound that's going to be the port of entry for the U.S. government. The idea is to give this port of entry to the federal government. The remaining, or a large portion of the remainder of the project costs, will be financed with tolls from a dynamic toll that will be put out on SR 11. The project will basically try to finance most of the port of entry costs. We're also pursuing grants in state and federal. So you could see the flyover, you could see a little bit of the Mexican port of entry and how we're working with the Mexican government. We signed a memorandum of understanding with the Mexican government a year ago, and where we had some major agreements on one single toll location, revenue sharing for the toll. So there's only going to be a toll northbound and a toll southbound located on the US side, just between the highway and the port of entry after the Siempre Viva Bridge. And we also agreed to strive for the opening in late 2024 for this facility. It's an extremely aggressive timetable that we're all pursuing, and several things need to be lined up in order to achieve that delivery date. The Mexican government is far ahead also in the right-of-way acquisition, as well as the design of their roadway and their port of entry. I think a major highlight that I will bring up on the Mexican side is that the project has now been risen to a presidential priority, and therefore the Mexican military will be in charge of delivering the project. This is just briefly where are we? This coming summer, we're going to have a site preparation, meaning we will prepare the entire site for the port of entry. We will be bringing about 1.3 million cubic yards of material to flatten the site. We're already working on bringing in new utilities, relocating some existing gas lines. The design team is already looking on the design itself. The ITS teams are working in concepts of operations. And that design team is working on the design of both the port of entry and the state facility. But like always, follow the money, right? All this is going to require some funding. And Andre is going to be talking to you about the financial strategy that we're pursuing. Andre?
Great, thanks, Mario. Before I get into the slides, I just want to put into context a little bit. So currently, Sandag has 3 bond indentures. Sandag's bonds are backed by the FFGA that we have the full funding grant agreement. The TransNet is backed by the 0.5% sales tax, and then the SR 125 that is backed by the toll revenues. So this Otay Mesa East will be our fourth indenture. And it's actually most similar to the SR 125, so our experience on that toll facility is very relevant to this project. But that being said, this is by far the most challenging credit that we've ever had to work on. That's not because it's just a local issue, local projects, but we have state agencies such as Caltrans that we're working with, federal agencies, and then on top of that, we're working with a foreign government in Mexico. So we have to have several agreements that we still need to have secured before we can go further with this project. Now, at least when we bought the SR 125 out of bankruptcy, it had some history, it was running, it had traffic history and revenues on it. But unlike that, this is a brand new, greenfield project. But frankly, that is why we come to work every day, for challenges like this. Now, just like with any other kind of financing, we assemble a financial team. PFM will be our financial advisors. Barclays is currently our underwriting firm on this, and Norton Rose Fulbright will be acting as our bond counsel and disclosure counsel. We also have counterparts in Mexico. Now, as you heard in the previous item, TransNet is backed by our sales tax, and our sales tax growth has been tremendous. And that's why we have the AAA. There's tremendous diversity in our sales tax base as well. But the Otay Mesa East, the only source of revenue that we'll be looking to pledge is the actual toll revenues, and there'll be no other Sandag revenues used. So the most important aspect of this project really to investors is whether we have sufficient revenues to cover the debt service. So the main question is this project standalone financially feasible? And so one of the most important teams that we hired is CDM Smith to do our investment grade traffic study, which really is the basis for our financial model. So today we'll be touching on the TNR report, the capture rates, the gross revenues, the project funding needs, the debt service coverage, and then the flow of funds. So a lot going on here on this chart, but basically the takeaway from this is there's approximately 150,000 crossings per day. And our study shows that approximately 10% of that, or 15,000 crossings, will happen at Otay Mesa East. So the good news is we don't even need to have a tremendous amount of percentage that is coming through our port of entry for us to be financially feasible. And on top of that, you'll see that on the charts on the right, a majority of that is from a passenger vehicle, which is kind of more sustainable as opposed to sometimes commercial vehicle. When you have economic downturns, it may not be as reliable as passenger vehicles that people have to come across for work. So this chart here basically forecasts the revenues going through to 2062, and 2062 obviously will go on beyond that, but that's how far that our debt service is outstanding. So in total, it's approximately $5.3 billion that'll come into this project, but you can see that the revenue growth is a little bit short in the earlier years and then kind of rises. And there's a number of reasons for that. We won't get into the details today, but that's in the CDM Smith report. So initially you can see that we're going to collect $15 million in 2025, grows to $68 million in 23, $128 million in 2043, et cetera, all the way to approximately 267 in 2062. So you'll see in the charts to come that we basically have to align our debt service with a kind of similar ascending structure. So again, this shows that there's approximately $5.3 billion coming in, and after some leakage and some tolling costs, there's be $4.75 billion that'll be coming in, and we'll be sharing this revenue equally with the Mexican counterparts, approximately $2.3 billion in total through 2062. So this slide shows the costs approximately, over $1 billion on the U.S. side, approximately $250 million on the Mexican side. Focusing on the US side, we have paid $150 million for the right-of-way, approximately $415 million for the roadway, total of $565 million. And as Mario mentioned earlier, 51% of that has been paid with federal funds, 40% from state, and just 9% with local funds. What we're going to focus on is the numbers in red, and that's what's outstanding for us to go ahead and finance, and that's actually for the port of entry, the commercial vehicle enforcement facility, and the ITS infrastructure. So we funded approximately 55%. We're going for the remaining 45%. So you can see, again, this is the debt service structure on the right-hand side. You can see it's somewhat ascending. And there's three chunks of money that we're hoping to get. One is approximately $86 million in bond proceeds, $243 million in a TIFIA loan, and there's currently $147.5 million that remains unfunded. But we anticipate they'll be able to get SB1 TSEP Cycle 3 funds for that, or some kind of federal funding. Again, the IIJA is a great option for us right now, and the team is really focused here on going and getting grants for the remaining portion of the money needed. And again, I've talked just actually last week to Barclays Bank, who's our underwriter. They could even get potentially a short-term note from them if needed. But as you can see, the chart on the right shows the annual debt service, which is pretty backloaded because of the ascending revenue that we're getting in. You can see the light green bars at the top. That's where the TIFIA loan kind of comes in. The bottom pink and the blue chart bars show the bond financing that we have, generally level debt service, but then we put on the structure of the TIFIA. And that's one of the benefits of the TIFIA loan. Besides being the cheapest form of financing, as I mentioned earlier, it's tied to the 30-year Treasury, which is approximately 3% today. It's also very flexible in the sense that you don't have to make payments until at least 5 years after substantial completion. And also they give you flexibility in how you pay it. So that's why you'll see the TIFIA is kind of laid on top. And so it's really an important integral part of our financing. So the next thing I want to cover here is our debt service coverage. So we've worked closely with PFM and Barclays Bank, our underwriters, and that we need to get at least a BBB- rating, which is an investment grade rating for a TIFIA loan. Now that sounds really low compared to our AAA ratings that we have on TransNet, but when we actually purchased SR125 out of bankruptcy, they were also a BBB-. Based on the history that we've had the last 10 years, we've got that up to an A+. So we're confident that we can get a BBB- on this. But one of the things is you can see where the target line is, the kind of the dotted line. If we were just to receive 50% of the revenues up front with Mexico, we kind of fall a little bit shy of what we think we need to get a BBB- rating. And so what we've asked the Mexicans is if we can get 60% of the money up front, and with a 10% residual going to them each year, if we're able to manage our debt service coverage ratio. And one thing that I could say, working with our Mexican counterparts over the last year, they've been really focused on the project. They want to get this project done, not just because of their needs, but it's also, the whole country, not only just for us in San Diego, California, but it's a nationwide need. They are the #1 trading partner. So they really want to get this project done. And so they've agreed to give us 60% of the revenues up front. It's something that we're working in the agreement, hopefully will be formalized in the next month. But with that additional revenue that we get up front, we'll be able to meet our debt service coverage ratio and hopefully be able to get the ratings that we need. So this chart basically shows the toll revenues coming in, and there's some, usually some leakage in a toll road paying for the O&M costs. We'll get the net revenues, 60% will come to Sandag initially. We'll pay all our debts payments. We'll fund up our reserve funds, and then if there's any residual revenues at the end, we'll ship them back to Mexico. And we're fairly confident that we'll be able to do that. But again, being conservative, we're getting a little more of the money up front. Just last week, we met with 3 rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and S&P. We spent 2 days here with them, with the entire team. So that was kind of one of the most urgent steps for us to go forward with the financing, is to get the rating from them. And we're hoping to get preliminary indicative ratings from them by the end of this month, early next month. And once we get that, then we can continue our timeline with the TIFIA loan that we hope to get done within a year from now. Once we get the TIFIA loan, probably a month after that, we can go to Wall Street and get the bond financing. I'm not going to go through all the agreements that are listed in front of you, but we're working really in parallel with our legal team that is led by Betsy Blake to get a number of legal documents done. At the same time, in parallel, we're working with the financing team to get a number of the issues that we need to in order to get this financed. But one of the things that I'm sure you've heard Hassan say is, Midcoast was our priority project last year. This year, the Otay Mesa East is our priority project. So really, we have the entire management team here focused on that. We all report to Mario, who's basically the leads this project. And, with Hassan's kind of leadership, we're focused, dedicated, and we're fairly confident that we'll be able to get the financing in time for this project to move forward. And with that, I'll turn it over to Maria, who will basically be talking to you about how we intend to deliver this project.
Thank you very much, Maria. We have about 15 minutes left, so hopefully we can get all of this done and on time. Go ahead.
I'll keep it short and on point. Hi, everyone. My name is Maria Rodriguez Molina. I'm the project manager here at Sandag for the Otay Mesa East project. So as you saw, we have the entire financial team ready to go, and now we're focusing on how will we deliver the project. And the remaining pieces, as Mario mentioned, are the commercial vehicle enforcement facility, the port of entry, and the ITS infrastructure. So we assemble a team of experts from both Sandag, Caltrans, and consultants to really take a dive into all the delivery methods that are allowable under our legislation, Senate Bill 1486. And so we took a look at design, bid, build, then design sequencing, and design build. So the traditional method is design, bid, build. What we would do is put out a contract for a designer, do that procurement first, complete the design, then move into procurement of construction and get a contractor on board. That's the longest delivery method. It has risks, especially when you include design with third parties, which are the federal government, GSA and CBP. It's hard to get all the details done before we get into construction, and we thought this doesn't really meet the schedule. It makes it hard on the scope, and we decided this method doesn't really fit with our needs of the project, given that it's a complex project with multiple partners and pieces, components. That would put us in a begin construction of September 2024, but as you heard before, our goal is to deliver a facility by the end of 2024. So next, we decided to move and look at design sequencing. This is a methodology we did use on the first segment of SR 11. It worked very well because at the time, not all of the right-of-way was available. So we sequenced in pieces the roadway, and we put out packages for the design and construction of the right-of-way that we had in possession. It worked very well, but it doesn't really lend for projects that involve vertical facilities. And the port of entry has multiple vertical structures and also the ITS components. It would really be hard to do it under this methodology. So next we looked at the design build. This methodology allows you to do one procurement for a designer and a contractor at the same time. So there is a savings in time during the procurement process. And it also allows you to overlap the design phase with the construction phase. So there are multiple savings in the schedule and efficiencies. This methodology also moves the risk toward the contractor for construction. And it also allows us to expedite specific phases of the project as they become available. And as we finish packages of design, we can start building those at the same time. So this would look at awarding a design build probably early next year if we start the procurement process in the coming weeks, and then be able to begin construction in the summer next year, which really aligns with the other project that Mario mentioned, the site preparation. The site preparation job will do all of the drainage, the utility work, and prepare the site to make it nice and flat before we come in with the buildings. And that project is scheduled to begin this summer and then completed next summer. So just to summarize where we're at with the project, as you heard before, we have a financial team ready to go with the TIFIA process. We're getting the indicative ratings. We have a legal team working on multiple memorandum of understanding, legal binding agreements with Mexico and the federal agencies. And then we have the delivery team looking at the design and construction options. So really, we're looking at an expedite schedule with a procurement starting in the coming months and having somebody on board next year to complete the project by the end of 2024. This really concludes the presentation, but I'll pass it on to Mario for closing statements.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Andre. At the end, one question that, and we can stop the presentation so we could go into the full screen. At the end, there were several comments made on managing risk and things that keep people awake or not allowing them to sleep. I think this project, as you can see, it's we're in a very final stretch, and I think there are a couple of key points definitely that I wanted to make. The team is ready to deliver. The financial team, the legal team, the engineering teams. We have built the structure both at Sandak and Caltrans that we're all systems go. But we don't control the steps. And we're working pretty hard in tandem with the federal government on securing the staffing for this port of entry. Our government relations team is working hard on this, but at the end, it's a decision of the administration and Congress to allocate staffing for this project. Also, the agreements with the federal government, it's another policy decision. Even so, the project is a go. The uniqueness of the project brings in unique challenges for staff at the federal government trying to understand how to put a circular project in a square box, which is what they're used to. So those are some of the challenges that if you were to ask me, so I'm saying in advance, those are the challenges that we're dealing with, which are not surmountable, and we're working pretty good on them. But I do want to, highlight that. And also being this is Italk, and it deals with the funding and the risk. Also, those two other prior risks that I brought up bring up the major risk of timing versus inflation and cost creep. So that is why we're also so eager to move everything forward so inflation or cost creep wouldn't catch up to us. We're very excited about the project. We're very of achieving the late 2024, early 25 delivery date. And that concludes our presentation. We're open for any questions you may have from us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Urso and the team for your presentation. Are there any public comments on this topic?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, I know I have several questions, but I'm going to ask Italk members if there are any comments first. Mr. Urso, the other Mr. Urso.
The question, and Mario partly answered it, has to do with the agreements from the federal government to take over the port of entry. And I understand the strategy of finishing the roadway, which is the right approach. We don't want to be in a situation like we were with the 905, where the port of entry was done first, and then everything funneled through Otay Mesa, and that was bad, really bad from a safety point of view with all of the trucks and the accidents at the intersection. But so I understand that the strategy is we will deliver this and we will put it in a bow with a wrapper in front of the doors of CBP so that it makes it really, really hard for them not to staff it. And I know that, and I get it, and I applaud that. I guess my question is more for Andre. From a financial point of view, that agreement with CBP having the staffing element, what risk does it create for you to be able to get the final financing for the project?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's probably the biggest concern that we have as a financing team. And frankly, unless we have appropriation from the federal government that they're going to be paying for that facility, we will not get financing. But again, I think based on what you've said and based on, you know, the several conversations that we've had with the CBB, Hassan has been back to DC several times, the meetings that he's taken. The CBB will, they've all but told us that they will, you know, they will man this, but we really need that in writing. We need it to be appropriated, and that's the only way this project goes ahead. So you're absolutely right. That's the biggest risk from the financing perspective.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Halpern.
Thanks. Just one quick one for Andre. Does the TIFIA loan require any particular rating from the rating agencies, or do you just simply need to demonstrate the 1.3 quarters coverage and that's good enough for TIFIA?
Yeah, great question. The TIFIA office does require an investment grade rating, which is at least a BBB minus. So our ask last week from the rating agencies was give us at least a BBB, knowing that, you know, we can go as low as a BBB minus with TIFIA.
Got it, thanks.
I don't see any other hands. I do have several
Chair House, yes. Chair House, I believe Michael Kenny has some comments as well.
A quick question for you about.
Yes, Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
The graphic of Semper Viva, the interchange, maybe it was just a limitation of your graphic, but is the county or the city going to have that roadway complete?
Actually, the roadway on the east side is totally complete, connecting to Camino de la Fuente, Paseo de la Fuente. And then we are in negotiations with the developer on the west side. He just needs to secure an additional piece of land far west from Caltrans to be able to begin the Siempre Viva connection from that other side. So we are very comfortable that that facility will eventually be also serving as independent utility.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think those were all the comments from my top members. What's the percentage of TransNet funds in this project, and what are the risks to basically this TransNet expenditure?
The full amount of the TransNet funds, we were looking at the numbers today in preparation. They're about $13 million. Some were put on design out of the $596 million. The majority were TransNet borders and major corridors, and the biggest bulk was put in the right-of-way. Originally, it was about $6 million, and I'm talking round numbers, for the right-of-way acquisition participation from TransNet. Since then, there were savings. We concluded the acquisition of all the right-of-way, and there were some savings on the TransNet portion, and they went back to the corridor, and we're looking into using those funds or analyzing, and no decision has been yet made on applying those funds as leverages or matching funds for upcoming grant applications or contracts that are non-federalized.
Very good. And, there's a lot of, I guess, risks involved here. There's a lot of ifs as far as what needs to happen. What's the chance of getting the approval on the TIFIA loan? I mean, that's not guaranteed typically. So how are you making sure that happens? Because that's a significant part of the funding program.
Yes, great question. So we've already applied to the TIFIA office last year in November, and they've taken it up their flagpole, and they like the project. I think they think the project is feasible. We've already taken a look at the maximum amount that we can use of the TIFIA, because again, that's the cheapest form of financing. So we're all set. Really what we're waiting for is the indicative ratings that we anticipate getting as early as next month. And once we get that, we go through the process, and generally it could take 9 to 12 months. So we're saying potentially by next April, we'll have the TIFIA loan ready to go.
Very good. And my last question, I know we're at time. I looked at your timeline. You have about 8 months. I believe you said you'll start advertisement next week for the design.
We may slip a little bit more. We're waiting for those signals from GSA to review the request for qualifications. And we're in negotiations with the federal government on that aspect.
Okay, so it sounds like you'll have about 8 months for a procurement process if you want to award by February 23rd. And having seen other procurements, I hope that can happen. The design build procurement process seems to be a lot more complicated than a regular on-call A&E services, for example. And then you have 4 months for initial design if you're going to start. If you're going to start construction, it sounds like. Am I reading these right? If you could just maybe elaborate on that a little bit, because it just seems like it's such a fast track based on previous experiences. Is this really a realistic schedule?
There are phases and components that we could start constructing within 4 months. The paving of the internal roads within the port of entry. It would probably not be the buildings. We might need additional time for that. But that's why we're choosing design build, so that we can really overlap that design and construction. But I do agree with you. It's very aggressive schedule, and we're shooting for it, but it might slip, as Mario was mentioning, due to the agreements. But the goal is still to try to deliver by the end of 2024.
So what type of a package is the contractor getting? Is the design halfway done, or how far are you advancing design before you get the contractor's bid?
We're actually going to be doing a design build with a design competition. So we're only giving about 15% design, but we have a full package with specs and requirements that it was developed by CBP. It's called the Program of Requirements. And with that, 3 teams will be pre-selected, and they'll have about 6 months to develop about 35% of the design before we decide which team we're going to go for.
And are you providing any stipends for?
We will be providing a stipend. Yes.
Let me just make a point here. This is the current strategy. We will need to go to the board of directors to request this strategy. There may be in the near future other tools in the toolbox with other possible procurements. Maria just analyzed the procurements that are allowed in the current legislation. But there is ongoing legislation right now, drafted Senator Wessel submitted, that could potentially increase the different methods of delivery. If that happens, we may come back to all of you and report on other strategies. So I would say stay tuned.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria, Mario, and Andre, for your presentation. We look forward to getting progress updates as things move forward. And I don't see any other hands or questions. So I believe we're on the last item on the agenda, which is our future meeting schedule. Please keep in mind that this is not our regular schedule. We postponed it by about a week, and it's on a Tuesday, June 14th at 9:30 a.m. and hopefully we'll meet in person. With that, I would like to adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to all the presenters for doing your wonderful presentations. Bye-bye.